Don't ever touch that safe. If you do, it's all over. When I got home, the cash box was gone, and there was a letter and a signed divorce petition on the table. I'm tired of being sensible. Please sign and submit the divorce petition, Sophia. I looked up at the ceiling, holding back tears. Unable to contain myself, a tear slid down my cheek. You've already lost the bet, Aiden. I, Sophia, work as a tax accountant at a small office in a corner of Boston. Tax accounting isn't as glamorous as being a lawyer or a doctor, with no dramatic cases, and as a staff accountant, my job mainly involves supporting the senior accountants, which is pretty low-key. However, I take pride in handling important matters involving clients and the nation's money, where no careless work or mistakes are allowed. I think this job suits me. Live earnestly and honestly. My dad, who runs a tax office in a small town, always raised me with those words. Since childhood, I kept a record of my allowance and managed it myself, with saving being more of a lifestyle than a hobby. My mom died of illness when I was in high school. However, I felt distrust towards Dad, who went back to work the day after the funeral. Did he have no emotions? Dad didn't answer that question. I had friends, but I wasn't interested in fashion or idols, and I liked studying, so my path from public high school to college was a quiet and steady one. Even in college, there weren't many places to go out and have fun, and even if there were, I didn't go, so I obtained bookkeeping and accounting certifications while still in school. Of course, I had no romantic experiences. The only adventurous thing I did was move to Boston after graduation. It wasn't because I was attracted to Boston's glamour. It was simply because there were many offices hiring. Dad could run his office alone, and if I joined, it would just unnecessarily increase expenses. Fortunately, I had my certifications, so I easily got into the office I work at now. Honestly, I also wanted to get away from Dad. The town was prosperous, but while I continued working, I studied on weekends. It took me 2 years to get my tax accountant certification. I earned a relatively stable salary, and without aiming for a career advancement, one day in my late 20s, I got a call from Amelia. How's it going? Have you found someone you like yet? Amelia was a high school friend, sociable and stylish, the complete opposite of me, but somehow we got along. She had been in Boston since college, so we occasionally had meals together or chatted on the phone. She is very kind but has a tendency to worry, always concerned about my love life. Amelia got married a few years ago and has a young child. I know your personality well, Sophia, but are you planning to stay single forever? Well, it's not like I intend to, but as time goes by, having kids, raising them, it all becomes harder, doesn't it? Building a house, taking out education loans. Isn't it sensible to start thinking about these things now? I couldn't argue back. It wasn't like she was trying to one-up me, she was genuinely worried. Even so, I don't have any opportunities to meet anyone. Well, then, let me ask my husband. He might know some single guys. Just meet them once. If it doesn't work out, you can just say no. Amelia was pushy. But it's also true that unless someone pushes me like that, I wouldn't take any action myself. As I hesitated to reply, all right, I'll contact you once we set a date. Just text me the days and times you can't make it. I ended the call quickly, as if deciding on an ordinary dinner date. I felt like I had been caught in a sudden storm, but I didn't feel bad about it. Without opportunities like this, I might be alone forever. At my age, that thought was starting to feel like a reality. I thought about it for a day and texted Amelia my available dates. A week later, Amelia called. It's set. There's a salesman coming to my husband's company who really wants to meet you. I've reserved a private room at a restaurant near the station for Saturday at 6 p.m. Isn't that a bit sudden? I was talking about you to my colleagues, and it seems everyone is either married or has a girlfriend. Then this guy came up and asked, would I be okay? He's a bit unreliable at work, but he's talkative and energetic. It's not like you're deciding to date him, just meet him. You're coming, too, right? What are you talking about? I have to take care of my kids and husband. You're an adult now, you need to do this on your own. Don't go in your usual no makeup and plain clothes, dress up nicely. Oh, Anne. And? He's 2 years younger than us. Good luck. Amelia is really pushy. And being alone with a stranger makes me anxious. Well, he must feel the same way. Anyway, things have started moving. Since Amelia's husband and his business contacts are involved, I can't cancel just because I feel uneasy. I made up my mind. On the day, I put on makeup I usually don't wear and chose one of the nicer outfits I had bought for travel before heading to the restaurant. I arrived a little early, but there was no sign of anyone outside, so I went into the private room alone. At 6:10 p.m., he still hadn't arrived. Maybe his train is delayed. At 6:20 p.m., I started to worry that I had the wrong time or place and was about to check Amelia's text when a slender man rushed into the room. Sorry. Are you Sophia? I got caught up with some unexpected work. This is how I met my husband, Aiden. I thought it was a bad impression to be late on the first meeting, but I couldn't help but laugh at how desperately he apologized. It broke the ice a bit. Aiden tried hard to make up for his mistake, complimenting my gestures and outfit. With exaggerated reactions, he even knocked over his glass during the conversation. Oh no! Are you okay? I've never talked to this kind of guy at school or work. I wondered if this is what having a younger brother would be like. Contrary to my worries, there wasn't any awkward time, and Aiden was not only talkative but also good at drawing me out, making it an enjoyable evening. When it was time to pay, I took out my wallet. I'll pay since I'm the guy. He refused to take my money. In return, can I have your contact information? He asked, blushing a little. We exchanged contact information and parted ways. After that, Amelia set up dinners with a few other men. There was an executive from a listed company and an entrepreneur who had started his own business. They were all gentlemen and kind, but I didn't have as much fun with them as I did with Aiden. Aiden texted me every day. It wasn't anything important, but it became a source of comfort for me. He also started calling, and we even talked late into the night sometimes. Worried about Aiden's constant dining out, I would cook for him and clean his messy apartment. That's how we became a couple and decided to get married. Even though I introduced him to you, I never thought you'd marry someone like this. Amelia said, but I was happy. There were concerns about marrying Aiden. Aiden had debts and a habit of overspending. Even though he didn't earn much, he would spend money as soon as he got it. If he didn't have money, he would easily turn to lenders or cash advances. Also, there was still a lot of student loan debt left. If you don't have money, just borrow it. You can pay it back later. Of course, that wouldn't work for everyday life. First, we had to start by reducing the debt. I took control of Aiden's debit card and managed all the finances. Relying on my financial knowledge, I organized the debts, made a repayment plan, and somehow managed to make ends meet. Aiden lived in the apartment I had bought when I was single, so there was no worry about rent. I had a huge fight with my boss. When he quit his job before we got married, I was filled with worry. I thought about divorcing him and kicking him out, but by then, I was already pregnant. I was deeply in love and couldn't abandon Aiden at that point. If I left, Aiden would be on a path to destruction soon. He had been giving me his salary without complaints and enduring with little allowance. He also helped with housework and spoke kind words. I had a stable income, so I decided to endure and support him. Thanks to his communication skills, he soon started a part-time job, but his income dropped. For the sake of our child, I worked hard until just before giving birth and had to return to work soon after. Aiden helped with childcare and housework, which was a relief, and the debts gradually decreased. Our son Ethan grew attached to Aiden, who spent a lot of time at home. There was a reason why Aiden turned out this way. When Aiden was young, his parents divorced, and when he was 7, his mother, Emma, remarried his current father, Lucas. Lucas, a speculator, had bought expensive toys for poor Aiden, who was raised by Emma alone. Lucas was living large, driving luxury cars at the time. He soon started living with Emma. Aiden, who missed having a dad, quickly bonded with Lucas and was influenced by his way of thinking. Spend money when you have it. If you don't, borrow it or take it from someone who has it. Lucas would say this drunkenly, and even though Aiden didn't take it seriously, it was imprinted in his mind. Luxurious meals, game consoles, and luxury cars were all thanks to Lucas. But that life didn't last long. When Aiden was in high school, Lucas made a huge mistake in speculation and suddenly disappeared. Emma returned to an old apartment, and they were poor again. Aiden almost gave up on college, but with encouragement from teachers and Emma, he managed to graduate with scholarships and part-time jobs. When Emma collapsed from overwork and died while he was still in school, Aiden's life fell apart, but he managed to recover. I thought he was the complete opposite of my dad. Because of our debts, we didn't have a wedding ceremony. We just went to get a marriage license together. My dad hated debts, so I knew he would strongly oppose Aiden. After going to college, I didn't keep in touch much, so I just reported my marriage through a letter. A few days later, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside, there was a bank account in my name and a letter addressed to Aiden and me. The balance was $20,000. Feeling guilty about my actions, I wanted to call and return it right away, but I couldn't muster the courage. "Do you think they want us to use this money for the wedding?" Aiden said, but I hesitated to use it. I was tempted to use it for repaying our debts, but I decided against it. "We should return all of this once we've cleared our debts. It won't mean anything if we don't do it on our own." With that, I tucked the debit card into a lockbox. This lockbox was one of the few things I brought from my parents' home. Mom used it to manage cash until she passed away, and I took the empty box when I went to college. All our family money, from childhood savings to the house deed, was stored in this box. I never let Aiden touch this box, and I didn't share the passcode with him. "Don't you trust me that much?" He seemed a bit disgruntled, but he respected the rule. I didn't open the envelope. I felt that reading it might destroy something. When Ethan was born, during his school entrance and graduation ceremonies, and when he wore his high school uniform, I sent photos to Dad. From Dad, I received letters with a single line that read, "Congratulations on entering high school, Ethan." Given Dad's personality, I assumed money was being transferred into the bank account. But I didn't bother to check. There were ups and downs. Aiden quit his job again, and I had to convince Ethan to pursue college instead of jumping straight into a job after high school, and 20 years later, we were close to paying off our debt. Aiden took on double shifts at the supermarket and quit smoking and gambling. Ethan, too, although he had his wants, studied hard and got into a prestigious public high school, then a top university. At my office, I started getting assigned bigger projects. I felt assured that I could face Dad with pride, but then an incident occurred. I met Dad. He said he was approached as he was leaving the supermarket after his shift. Aiden? It's been a while. The man, looking older and thinner than before, was undeniably the missing Lucas. Where have you been? Do you know how much Mom and I suffered? I'm sorry I left without a word back then. I had no other choice. Lucas had recently moved nearby and spotted Aiden working at the supermarket by chance, waiting until his shift ended. So, what happened after that? I told him Mom had passed away, shared some updates, and we parted ways. Since he lives nearby, we might meet again. Aiden fell silent, so I didn't press further. He probably had a lot on his mind. No matter what happened, your family now is me and Ethan. Let's focus on the future. Yeah, you're right. That was the end of that conversation for the day. However, from that day on, Aiden started to change. He came home later, sometimes drunk. There was a faint smell of cigarettes on his clothes. Could you increase my allowance a bit? We're almost done paying off the debt. He had never asked for an allowance increase before. Meeting Lucas must have stirred something in him. Given how long he'd endured without complaints, I felt bad about flatly denying his request. Sure, but do you have any specific plans for it? Actually, I've been meeting up with Dad occasionally. After that, Lucas and Aiden visited the supermarket and exchanged contact information. At first, he planned to confront him about why he left and abandoned them. It's a bit inconvenient to talk here at the store. Could you spare some time? They had several conversations over drinks. Dad's been through a lot. Although there were certainly hard feelings, they couldn't deny that some of the best family moments happened when Lucas was around. They reminisced about the past, recalling memories, and found it hard to keep hating him. I couldn't say anything. For Aiden, Lucas was the only person he could call a parent now. Considering my own relationship with my dad, I wasn't in a position to advise Aiden. As Aiden's allowance increased, his return times became more irregular. His behavior also started to change. Once the debt is paid off, how about a trip to Las Vegas? It's good to be practical, but a man sometimes wants to hit it big, right? It's a bit of a pride thing to not be trusted with the money. There were times when Lucas brought him home completely drunk. You're Aiden's wife. You have a nice old house here. Despite his rude, ungrateful attitude, I politely thanked him. I'm sorry for the trouble. Would you like to come in for some coffee? No, thanks. I've caused enough trouble already. There was something dangerously charming about Lucas's smile. I could see why people might be drawn to someone like him. I heard you've been helping reduce the debt for many years. Thank you. Aiden is grateful too. Well, being practical is my only strength. If it were me, I'd take a gamble to settle things all at once, but men and women think about money differently. And it's not my place to say, given my track record. Your name is Sophia, right? Being practical is good. Aiden seems to be under a lot of stress, so let him have some freedom occasionally. Anyway, I'm heading home. With that, Lucas left. A sense of foreboding deepened. About a month later, Aiden came home drunk and suddenly asked, By the way, how much do you think is in that bank account your dad gave us? I haven't checked. We agreed not to use it, remember? Why? I was just thinking that if we used it, we could finish paying off the debt sooner. It's a waste to keep paying interest. I've explained that it's part of the repayment plan, so there's no need to worry. You're not borrowing money from somewhere, are you? I haven't had the freedom to play around for the last 20 years. But instead of locking it away, it might be more efficient to invest or something. I think it's fine as it is. Money is meant to be used. Anyway, I've got a busy day tomorrow with my part-time jobs, so good night. Aiden was clearly influenced by Lucas. Danger signals went off in my head. Wait. What? I'm really tired. Don't touch that safe. If you do, it's over. I know. Stop nagging. Good night. Aiden slammed the bedroom door. Ethan peeked out from the next room, looking surprised. What happened? Mom, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Dad might have had a bit too much to drink. A week later, I came home to find the safe gone, with a letter and signed divorce papers on the table. After a moment of stunned silence, I opened the letter. Sophia, I'm going to be free. I've endured it for 20 years, so it's enough now. I want to take gambling as a man. You, being a woman, won't understand this feeling. Dad has got a surefire way to make a lot of money. He needs the initial investment, so I'll take the money from the safe. I'll send you back 10 times the amount once it works out, so please wait for a bit. However, I don't plan to return. I'm tired of living a steady life. Sign the divorce papers and submit them. Ethan, as a man, you should chase your dreams. Dad wasted 20 years of his life. Find a wife who will follow you quietly. I stare at the ceiling, holding back my tears. Unable to bear it, a tear rolls down my cheek. After staying like that for a while, I mutter, "You've already lost the bet, Aiden." I muster the courage and call out towards the door. Ethan, did it go well? Yeah, Mom. I got it perfectly. After that argument, Ethan had overheard Aiden talking on the phone with Lucas. It was then he realized Aiden was planning to steal the safe. The locksmith he planned to take it to and the escape plan were detailed in Aiden's notebook. Ethan took the notebook from a sleeping Aiden, photographed all its contents with his smartphone, and put it back. It included the execution date and the meeting date with Lucas. I replaced the safe with a dummy of the same type and went to the police with the evidence photos. To my surprise, Lucas was already on the police radar for financial fraud. Ethan also set up a webcam near the safe to capture the decisive evidence of the theft. Instead of a debit card, there was a GPS tag inside the safe. Aiden was apprehended near the locksmiths on the street where he was supposed to meet Lucas. But perhaps the biggest loser was me. I had gambled. That Aiden would reconsider and not touch the safe at the last moment. That he would cut ties with Lucas, who proposed such a plan. However, that didn't happen. I quickly submitted the divorce papers. With other charges, Lucas got a prison sentence, and Aiden, with a theft charge from family, got probation but was not allowed to return home. You wanted to be free, right? I'm letting you go. I don't want to follow your back. It was just a momentary lapse in judgment. He pleaded like that, but with that momentary lapse, he threw away 20 years of family life. I can't find forgiveness in my heart. I look again at the safe that had protected me. It was plain and awkward, but the safe left behind by Mom had safeguarded us all this time. I gently opened it, and for the first time, I opened a letter from Dad. Sophia, congratulations on your marriage. Mom is surely happy in heaven. I don't have the right to say this, as I was not there for the family much, but I hope you build a happy home. Aiden, please take good care of Sophia. Dad loved Mom deeply, and he always cared about me too. But he didn't know how to express it and could only show his way of a happy life through the methods he knew. The regret of letting Mom pass away first and not finding the words to console me during my teenage years after losing Mom left an emotional gap that never closed over time. I, on my part, avoided confronting Dad. I rebelled to escape the guilt, immersing myself in studies and work, and I think a part of me intentionally subjected myself to a harsh lifestyle as a form of self-punishment. It wasn't just Aiden who abandoned the family ties, I did too. When I checked the bank account, I was shocked to find a large sum of $500,000 deposited. Surprised, I called, only to find out that Dad had already left his office, sold both the office and the parents' home, and moved into a smaller house. After ensuring he had enough for himself to live on and adding his savings, he deposited the remaining amount into the bank account as a living gift after taking care of taxes. None of this was mentioned in the letter. I gratefully used the money to set up my own office, under the same CPA office name as Dad's. While Ethan, currently studying to become a CPA, will join this office is uncertain, but if he ever wants to come back, there will be a place for him. During the next long weekend, I'll take Ethan to visit Dad. I hope we can gradually and steadily untangle the knots in our family bonds. The entire inheritance goes to the funeral organizer. Thanks for the big money, Trevor. Stephen and his wife were acting ridiculously in front of the coffin, giving thumbs up and taking pictures, causing a ruckus. They were convinced they'd get the inheritance and kept saying things like, "Today is a great day." But I wonder if they'd still be happy once they found out what the inheritance really was. I can't wait to see their reactions when they learn the truth. My name is Kristen, and I'm 46 years old. During the long holiday, I indulged in lots of delicious food and gained a bit of weight. Well, I suppose my metabolism will speed up in the summer, and I'll lose the weight. Although, I said the same thing last year and didn't lose any weight in the end. Sigh. I work hard at home and my job, so I think it's okay to indulge a little during the holidays and do what I like. Is indulgence bad? No, it's my money, so it's fine. After all, some people out there think it's okay to splurge with someone else's money. It all started when I was in my 30s. I had been married to my husband Taylor for several years. We received the good news that Taylor's brother, Stephen, was finally getting married. Stephen's getting married, huh? I wonder if it'll be okay. Taylor and I both sighed with concern. Stephen is a rather quirky person. Taylor's family is quite wealthy. His father, Trevor, comes from a long line of wealthy people. Although the family name isn't as influential as it used to be, Trevor has managed to keep the wealth through investments. Despite never having to work outside, he still makes a good living just by watching the stock market. So, they're still considered well off by most standards. Taylor often said, "There wasn't much emphasis on frugality when I was a kid." Because of that, his sense of money was quite skewed. It was only after becoming an adult and interacting with colleagues and bosses that he started to gain a more common-sense approach to money. Stephen, on the other hand, had an even more distorted sense of money than Taylor, perhaps because he had been pampered as the eldest son. He would buy whatever he wanted without hesitation and, despite having been in the workforce for quite some time, had no savings at all. He didn't even have the concept of saving money, spending his entire monthly salary every month. Moreover, he spent money on frivolous things. He would buy a large number of trendy clothes because celebrities wore them, order home appliances from TV shopping that he never used, and purchase large quantities of snacks and manga trending on social media. Stephen's family was worried about him and tried to advise him, saying, "Even elementary school kids save their allowance, so you should too." But it had no effect. Instead, he said, "We have money. I have a job. If you're still worried, I should just marry someone rich. Stephen was sociable and attractive, partly because of his wealthy background, but his relationships never lasted. Women were put off by his extravagant spending and thought of him as unsuitable for marriage. We were concerned about Stephen's marriage. Would his wife tolerate his spending? Or was she wealthy as he declared? Either way, we sensed trouble. And our instincts were right. Stephen's wife, Sabrina, came from a family that had become very wealthy through organic farming. They not only ran a farm but also operated direct sales outlets, and their business was booming. They were clearly a more prominent family than ours. Stephen achieved his goal of marrying into wealth and, before the wedding, said, "Sabrina is the ugliest of all my girlfriends, but she has a secure wallet, so she's a good wife." His cold manner made it clear that he had no affection for Sabrina. We felt sorry for her, thinking she had been deceived by such a man. Then, one day, Sabrina inadvertently revealed her true feelings in front of her Mil, Aurora. "I wanted a husband with money, so Stephen is the ideal partner." She realized her slip and quickly covered her mouth in panic. Her flustered reaction showed she truly thought she had messed up. She couldn't even find words to cover it up. So, she too had married Stephen for his money. Faced with a couple who married for money, we and my in-laws were exasperated and couldn't even say, "At least they're well matched. At least they're well matched." People who marry for money. I hope it doesn't lead to trouble. One day, while harboring such anxieties, a problem arose just as we expected. It happened during the Christmas visit to the in-laws. "Wow! Such a lavish spread!" Sabrina exclaimed with delight at the sight of the sumptuous feast laid out on the table. "It's your first visit home since getting married, so I ordered catering from a place we frequent," Trevor said, smiling warmly at Sabrina, hoping she would be pleased. Even I, who had visited many times before, was astonished by the extravagance of the dinner that evening. It was probably some kind of haute cuisine. There were elegant fish tranches, carpaccio adorned with caviar and truffles, and various other dishes that looked quite expensive. The desserts, beautifully presented, were equally impressive and lifted one's spirits just by looking at them. For a woman who loves chic things, this meal would surely be a delight. Sabrina, who is younger than my husband and me, prefers somewhat flashy outfits. Even though I don't know her well, I could tell from her appearance that she likely has a taste for fashionable items. Trevor probably chose dishes that he thought Sabrina would like. In fact, when I first visited, Trevor had asked Taylor about my favorite foods and had them prepared. Before marrying Taylor, I had a preconceived notion that rich people were arrogant, which made me wary. However, Trevor, born into wealth, is genuinely kind. Needless to say, I quietly reflected on my unfounded prejudices. I expected Sabrina would appreciate Trevor's thoughtful gesture and feel happy, but I'm so happy. Good thing we brought a Ziploc container. With that, Sabrina and Stephen pulled out a container from their bags and began packing the food. Everyone was dumbfounded by their shameless and brazen behavior. However, the couple seemed oblivious to our reactions. "Let's take extra of this. I love salmon. That chicken looks tasty, let's take it all. How long will this last? Will it stay fresh until we get home? Even if it gives us a bit of food poisoning, we can just take a day off work. Hospital bills would cost us, though. We'll be fine with just resting." Chatting cheerfully, Stephen and Sabrina filled their container, and before we knew it, more than half of the food on the table had been taken. Satisfied with their filled containers, they then began to eat the food. We, who had been speechless at their outrageous behavior, couldn't help but exclaim, "Wait, what are you doing? What makes you think you can just take the food?" Aurora scolded sternly. Trevor, too, was angry. I prepared this for everyone to enjoy together. What do you think you're doing? What? You prepared this for us, right? So, it's fine if we take it home, isn't it? Sabrina said with a surprised look. Seeing her acting as if she was in the right, my in-laws and my husband and I were utterly disheartened. This person is even more problematic than we thought. Meanwhile, this will save us on grocery expenses. I'll buy a game with the money we save. Stephen added. If you're going to act like that, then leave. Aurora shouted angrily. It was the only reasonable response. However, Sabrina, now with a dissatisfied expression, retorted. What's this about? No one told us we couldn't take the food home. She then added condescendingly. I could understand if you had prepared something more expensive and then got mad about us taking it, but... Her face turned red with anger. Get out. As long as I'm alive, I will never let you into this house again. With that, Aurora forcibly pushed the couple out to the front door. Stephen and Sabrina resisted, complaining all the while, but Aurora was resolute, no matter what they said. We couldn't help but worry about her, saying, Pooh, please calm down, your blood pressure might rise. But we didn't care about Stephen and Sabrina at all. In fact, we were thinking, just as Aurora said, get out. We didn't want to spend Christmas with such people. Stephen and Sabrina, realizing no one was on their side, seemed dissatisfied, but they left the house casually, thinking, well, at least we got the food. The storm had finally passed. Even in this situation, the fact that they managed to hold on to their container was astonishing, making us sigh in disbelief. After that, my husband and I stayed at the in-laws' house, but it goes without saying that the Christmas atmosphere was awkward. We hadn't done anything wrong, though. It was a few months later when it happened. While I was doing housework at home, the intercom rang, and when I looked at the monitor, there stood Sabrina. Sabrina, what brings you here? I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd drop by. It's cold outside, can I come in? She was Stephen's wife, after all. I had no choice but to let her in. Even though I wanted to say, you're a bother. I let her in, making no effort to hide my displeasure. You wonder if she didn't notice my expression? She's the kind of person who doesn't care about such things, making it all the more frustrating. As expected, Sabrina didn't even glance at my expression and entered the house as if she owned it. See, this is the kind of person she is. I thought, feeling utterly exasperated. So, what brings you here? I noticed that my tone had become a bit sharp, but I didn't bother to soften it. In response to my question, recently, I've been having money troubles. The economy is bad, and prices are higher than before, you know? She began speaking abruptly. I wondered what she was getting at, but replied, yeah, I guess that's true. She continued the conversation with a so anyway, but still didn't explain why she had come to our house, which made me feel uneasy. One thing I did notice was that all her conversations seemed to revolve around money. She talked about low wages, wondered how much actresses on TV were getting paid, and mentioned her interest in investments. A little small talk about money wouldn't usually bother me, but it was money, 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 all the time, and it was getting on my nerves. Did she come here just to talk about money with me? That couldn't possibly be the reason, could it? Or maybe she just didn't have any other topics to talk about? I wasn't very fond of Sabrina, and spending nearly 2 hours alone with her was exhausting. Hoping she'd leave soon. So, what do you need? I asked again. Oh, I came to borrow some toilet paper. She then smiled and answered. Excuse me? I couldn't believe my ears and looked at her in surprise. The local drugstore ran out of toilet paper, and we're out of stock at home, so we're in a bit of a bind. I think other stores should have some. The ones in this neighborhood are definitely stocked. Oh, but I'd hate to go to the store and find out they're sold out again. Please just lend me some. I suspected that Sabrina's claim about the toilet paper being sold out was a blatant lie. This wasn't the COVID-19 pandemic anymore, and as long as she wasn't picky about brands, it should be available. Besides, I've never heard of borrowing toilet paper. Would she take a few sheets? Or a whole roll? Moreover, did Sabrina, with her lack of common sense, even intend to return what she borrowed? Frustrated by her ridiculous request, I asked, "You say you want to borrow it, but will you actually return it?" To which she replied, "Of course, I will." Her voice was clearly strained. She had a look on her face that said, "I never thought of that." It was obvious she had no intention of returning it. Not that I hadn't already figured that out. So essentially, Sabrina was asking me to give her toilet paper. How audacious of her. I was exasperated and sighed deeply. "You can definitely buy some at the local supermarket, so please purchase it yourself." What? How can you say that when my family is in trouble? It's just a little bit, can't you lend it to me? Stingy. I wanted to retort who was really the stingy one, but I held back. If I lend it to you, we'll be the ones in trouble. Please leave. Oh. You're so rigid. Then lend me some sauce. Saying this, Sabrina walked briskly to the kitchen and casually stuffed a bottle of sauce into her bag. Hey! What are you doing? It's your fault for not even lending me toilet paper. What's wrong with taking a little sauce? Sabrina, arguing from the absurd stance that it was only natural I should lend her something. It was just insane. I repeatedly asked her to stop, but Sabrina, unsurprisingly, ignored my pleas, and in the end, she helped herself to some sauce, oil, salt, and other items from the kitchen, packing them into her bag. I was reluctantly forced to lend them to her. As expected, those items were never returned despite waiting. Moreover, as she was leaving, I noticed something that shocked me. There was a suitcase by the entrance that I hadn't noticed earlier in my surprise at her sudden visit. This can't be real, I thought, astonished. How much did she plan to borrow, or rather, take? Of course, I discussed this with Taylor, and we decided to keep our distance from the Stephen couple. A few years later, Trevor fell ill and was given less than a year to live. He would be living in the hospital from now on. This sparked a new problem visiting him. Trevor needed fresh clothes brought to him 2 or 3 times a week, but Aurora had bad legs and didn't have a driver's license. Moreover, the hospital where Trevor was admitted was in a large hospital in the next city. The transportation wasn't very convenient, and given Aurora's condition, frequent visits were going to be tough. We both had jobs and lived far from where Aurora and Trevor lived. While we had driver's licenses, we didn't own a car because we lived in a well-connected urban area. Visiting Trevor regularly was, while we wanted to help, it wasn't realistic. In desperation, Aurora contacted Stephen and his wife, explained the situation, and asked for help. This happened during a so-called family meeting, where my husband and I, Stephen and his wife, and Aurora gathered together. "Is it true that Dad collapsed?" Stephen asked. "It's true." Aurora answered with a gloomy face. Seeing Stephen and Sabrina's serious expressions made it seem like that Christmas commotion never happened. Well, that incident was due to their stingy nature. But if their real father collapses, even Stephen and Sabrina would get serious, or so I thought. Then we need to talk about the inheritance as well. Yes, how much will we get? I think it's determined by law. What? I want a lot. You're the eldest son, right? Yeah, I'm the eldest son, so I should get a lot. Right, Mom? Stephen and Sabrina, with serious expressions, were not worried about Trevor, but were casually talking about wanting a lot of inheritance. We were dumbfounded. Is this really the time to talk about that? Stephen? We gathered here today to discuss the hospital visits. I started to say. Oh, you and your wife can handle that. What? We don't need to visit. We've seen Dad's face many times since we were kids. Seeing him next in a coffin is enough, Stephen said, laughing loudly. He seemed to think he made a clever joke. What nonsense! While we were feeling utterly hopeless at Stephen's words, Sabrina said something shocking. There's no reason for us to come here other than to discuss the inheritance. By the way, Aurora, who didn't need to apologize at all, had called Stephen and Sabrina after the Christmas commotion to apologize, saying, I said too much back then. She did that just to hope that everyone would look after Trevor together. In truth, Aurora wanted to visit Trevor herself, but she couldn't. Getting old is frustrating, as Aurora herself lamented. Of course, if it was just about delivering clothes, the hospital had rental options. But Aurora didn't choose that because she didn't want Trevor to be left alone without any family to talk to during his hospital stay. She wanted everyone to show their faces to Trevor, especially now, in his final days. Stephen and Sabrina's words completely trampled on that hope, or rather, they didn't even realize it. My wife and I felt a growing anger. He's your real father. How can you say such a thing? Taylor shouted. But Stephen just smiled frivolously. Well, everyone goes to heaven eventually. Money stays in your hands, though. Sabrina even said. I'm not even related by blood, so as long as we get money, it's all good. Aurora was so devastated by the heartless words of Stephen and his wife that she burst into tears, saying, Poor Trevor! Since Trevor's collapse, Aurora had been emotionally unstable, and this treatment was too cruel. Eventually, after a heated argument between Taylor and Stephen left, saying, Well, you handle the rest. And he and his wife left on their own accord. Taylor and I had somewhat expected that relying on Stephen and his wife would be futile. But we thought they would at least be somewhat supportive. Since a family member had collapsed. We never imagined they would be so uncooperative. In the end, I decided to live with my in-laws for the time being. This meant living separately from Taylor. Even though I had a job, it was only part-time without any significant position, unlike Taylor. I was easily replaceable. The only issue was the transportation problem, so after discussing it with Taylor, I moved in with my in-laws and took on the responsibility of visiting Trevor. By carrying heavy items like clothes, Aurora could use public transportation with me to visit him. It was challenging, but I believed it was for the good of my in-laws and continued this lifestyle. A few months later, Trevor passed away. His final expression was peaceful, so I want to believe he was happy. While comforting the tearful Aurora at the funeral. Hey Sabrina, take a picture. Thumbs up. Stephen and his wife were taking pictures in front of Trevor's coffin, giving a thumbs up. Wait, why are they at the funeral? Didn't we tell them not to come? We had no intention of inviting Stephen and his wife to the funeral. In fact, they hadn't attended the wake. Because we hadn't told them about his passing. However, a relative of Taylor's had informed them, and for some reason, they decided to attend the funeral. Seeing Stephen and his wife being so jubilant. What are you doing? I confronted them. Today is a happy day. Stephen responded. What? Dad died, which means a big money opportunity. Stephen gave a thumbs up. Sabrina laughed lightly, saying, "Good things happen if you try hard enough." What exactly did you work hard at? My fists clenched in anger, my body shaking with rage. A happy occasion? I can't believe you. How can you say such a thing? Well, Kristen, I should be asking you the same thing. Even if he's your FIL, he's just some guy, right? You're getting an inheritance too, so let's celebrate together. Well, most of it will be mine, though. That's right, let's celebrate. But the inheritance goes entirely to the funeral organizer. Thank you for the fortune, Trevor. Stephen and Sabrina high-fived, celebrating. Their outrageous behavior left not just us, but all the relatives in shock. Besides, the funeral organizer is Aurora. There's no way we would entrust it to you. Don't make decisions on your own. And, inheritance, they seem clueless. Listen, you've been going on about the inheritance, but it's not just zero. It's negative. What? Stephen and Sabrina were stunned by my words. Well, what do you mean? Sabrina asked eagerly. Trevor gave pre-mortem gifts to Aurora and me. What? Realizing Stephen wasn't showing up at the hospital, Trevor inquired about our current situation in detail. Reluctantly, we explained everything. If that's the case, I'll give pre-mortem gifts to Kristen and Aurora for taking care of me even while living separately. We never asked for money. This decision was entirely Trevor's goodwill. However, Trevor, upon hearing our discussion, said angrily to Stephen and his wife, "How dare you treat people like an ATM?" It seemed he was inclined not to give them any inheritance because of this. Well, I understand that, but then at most it should be zero, right? Why is it negative? Sabrina's question made Taylor and me exchange glances. Taylor spoke quietly. Dad seemed to have co-signed a loan for an old colleague. What? Stephen and Sabrina were stunned. Aurora, looking distant, added, "He was a good-hearted man." So, what's the status of that loan now? Sabrina asked, trembling slightly. It looks like the borrower skipped town. We got a notice yesterday to pay the remaining debt. What? How are we supposed to handle that? Sabrina demanded. Since it's part of Dad's estate, you two will have to pay it off, Taylor said calmly. Why us? You're an heir too. Stephen shouted. That's right. Sabrina echoed. Their panic made us, including Aurora, burst into laughter. Annoyed, Stephen snapped. What's so funny? Taylor and Aurora renounced their inheritance after the pre-mortem gifts, I explained. What? Stephen and Sabrina gaped in shock. Is that even possible? Sabrina asked. It is. The two processes are separate, so receiving one doesn't prevent the other. There are tax implications, but unlike you, we're not overly concerned about money. Paying taxes is a small price compared to inheriting debt. I smirked as I spoke, and Sabrina turned red with anger, yelling. Who's overly concerned about money? Are you saying you knew Trevor was a co-signer? If not, Stephen didn't receive any pre-mortem gifts, so he renounced an inheritance of zero. You must have known. It's unfair. You're quite shallow. We had no idea. Trevor just advised us to renounce the inheritance after the gifts. It happened a long time ago, and maybe Trevor forgot about it in his sickbed, or perhaps he had a bad feeling. Is that even possible? Maybe our good deeds brought us some divine assistance, I said with a smile. However, Stephen and Sabrina's expressions remained grim. Sabrina's face grew more and more stern. I thought being the eldest son meant there'd be an inheritance. I've been tricked. I never should have married you, she shouted. Hey, there's no need to go that far. I'm still your husband, Stephen retorted. Yeah, right. You only married me for my family's money, Sabrina shot back. Well, the same goes for you. And you never let me enjoy any of that money because you're so stingy. This marriage is my biggest regret, Stephen countered. What did you say? You're the one who spends too much just because you think you have money. What will we do if we run out? You should be saving more, Sabrina yelled. That's exactly why I say you're obsessed with money. You have plenty, but you always make us live like misers. You've turned me into someone who's just as money-obsessed as you are, Stephen retorted. I'm just teaching you to be responsible with money, Sabrina insisted. This couple, they seem so similar yet can't agree on anything. It would be entertaining if it weren't taking place at Trevor's funeral. I wished they would stop arguing so loudly. I'm sorry to interrupt your lively discussion, I said. But as I mentioned, you are responsible for paying off the negative inheritance. Stephen and Sabrina protested, arguing why they should have to bear this burden. Wait, I can just renounce the inheritance too, Stephen exclaimed, looking triumphant as if he had just had a brilliant idea. Sabrina quickly agreed. The inheritance is 0, but that's better than a negative one. Stephen laughed. Stephen, didn't you sell some of Trevor's belongings before coming here? I asked. What? How did you know that? Stephen's eyes widened in surprise. I happened to overhear you on the phone with a friend earlier. You sold Trevor's watch at your friend's store for $20,000, right? Yeah, I stopped by the old house and found some valuable stuff. So I've already made some money. 0 inheritance is fine by me, but maybe there's still more valuable stuff among the belongings. I should go look, Stephen said, grinning. Well, that's fine. Those items are part of your inheritance now, I replied. Yeah, they're mine. Wait, inheritance? Stephen suddenly looked confused. By selling those items, you've effectively accepted the inheritance, which is called tacit acceptance. This means you can't renounce the inheritance anymore, I explained. What? Stephen's mouth was half open, making him look completely foolish. Next to him, Sabrina wore the same expression, and I secretly thought they were a perfect match. Immediately, Sabrina snapped. I told you not to rush things. She started blaming Stephen, trying to save herself. Stephen stood there in a daze, staring up at the sky. Taylor and I couldn't help but laugh at their misfortune. When I glanced over, Aurora was also watching with a satisfied look on her face. So were our relatives. No wonder. Stephen and Sabrina had barged in without considering the situation, causing a commotion with their constant picture-taking. Everyone in the venue was on our side. Well then, how about you just leave? Taylor and I called the staff, who then forced Stephen and Sabrina out of the venue. Even as they were being dragged away, they continued to hurl insults at each other. After that, Stephen and Sabrina tried to avoid taking on any debt and considered hiring a lawyer. But bad luck seemed to follow them. Their house, of all things, caught fire from a nearby blaze and was partially burned down. While the roof was still intact and it wasn't entirely uninhabitable, the smoke smell made it far from a peaceful living environment. Rebuilding the house would cost money. Hiring a lawyer would also require funds. Expenses just kept piling up. So, Sabrina thought of asking her family for financial help. However, her parents were in the midst of discussing a mature divorce. Apparently, her dad's domineering ways had pushed her mom over the edge. Her mom had decided she wanted to live a free life and opted for divorce. As a result, Sabrina's plea for help was met with, "You're a grown adult. Don't rely on parents who are about to split up." With no one left to turn to, Stephen and Sabrina had no choice but to take on Trevor's debt and inherit the only family home that hadn't been part of the earlier inheritance. Why didn't Aurora inherit the family home during the lifetime gift? The family home had begun to sink at that time, causing the house to gradually tilt. Of course, while Aurora was alive, it wasn't uninhabitable. However, the tilted house affected her inner ear, causing dizziness and other health issues frequently. Aurora injured her leg due to falling from dizziness. When I received the lifetime gift from Trevor, he asked me to live with Aurora after he passed away. Therefore, after the funeral, she has been living with my husband and me. In short, not only the debt but also the family home was a negative inheritance. Sabrina often yells at Stephen, saying, "I wouldn't have to pay off the debt if I hadn't married you." If she's so unhappy, she should just divorce him, but with her parents divorced, she has no one else to rely on and clings to Stephen. More than anything, she hates the idea of having a divorce in her history. She probably thinks it will tarnish her record. Being overly concerned with appearances can make life tough. Thus, Stephen and Sabrina became a couple in name only, paying off debt in the tilted house. I wouldn't want to live that kind of life. How terrifying. Meanwhile, Taylor and I, who had been childless for a long time, found out I was pregnant soon after Aurora started living with us. Could she be a stork? We spent the next 10 months thinking that, and finally, we had a healthy baby boy. He loves Grandma and is a kind-hearted person. Moreover, he's so smart that he easily understood the stock trading Taylor jokingly taught him. Of course, we haven't let him actually trade as it would be problematic if he lost money. To our surprise, his food preferences are remarkably similar to Trevor's, making us wonder if he's Trevor's reincarnation. Well, it's probably just a coincidence, but nevertheless, I sometimes think that while Stephen and Sabrina were punished, some mysterious happiness came to our home. I shouldn't have been born. Rejected by my parents and ultimately abandoned. My aunt and uncle said they wanted to be my family, but I was sure they would abandon me too. That's what I thought. It's been 10 years since that unbearably painful day. Unbelievably happy days awaited me. My name is Mary. I was a beginner at dancing, but I joined a dance fitness class for mothers and now, at 40, I'm living days that feel like high school club activities. No matter how old you get, life can be enjoyable. I now live every day vibrantly, but as a child, I was weak and far from any notion of youth. It all started when I was 10 years old. I had a high fever for several days, and despite going to the hospital, the cause remained unknown. I was shuffled from one hospital to another until I finally ended up at a hospital where I was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, a rare disease. Even a minor trigger would cause a fever, and the side effects of the prescribed steroids made my face round, while the disease symptoms caused hair loss. Even when my condition stabilized, any carelessness would put me back in bed, leaving me constantly fatigued. So, unlike normal kids, I couldn't stay up late or play until I was exhausted. Eventually, my mother said, "Mary, you get fevers too easily, so playing with friends is off limits." I stopped going out, and my body gradually gained weight. Friends probably didn't enjoy hanging out with someone like me. The number of people who wanted to play with me decreased. Even my parents, while drinking at night. She gets fevers all the time, and although the medical costs are subsidized, the taxi fares for taking her to the hospital are quite expensive. Why did we have to have such a child? complained about me. I didn't choose to have this disease. Not understanding my feelings of living with an incurable illness, they said whatever they pleased, and I harbored resentment toward my parents. But at the same time, I longed for their love like before the illness, making my feelings very complicated. Through it all, my older sister, Rolla, 2 years my senior, always stayed by my side. Rolla, at 12, already had a refined face, the so-called beauty. When we went to the shopping street together, "You're so cute, here's a freebie," people would say, often giving us 4 or 5 more freebies than we ordered. With her round, cute eyes and straight hair, it was as if she had inherited her looks from our quarter-blood grandmother, with her small face and long limbs resembling a model's. Our parents doted on the undeniably beautiful Rolla. Whenever we went out, my mother always held Rolla's hand, and it was common for my parents to go out with Rolla alone. I don't remember ever having my hand held, and being left behind was a frequent occurrence. I think they loved me more equally before I got sick. But after I fell ill. "If I walk with you, Mary, who has a round face from the steroids, people will think I'm a parent who can't manage their child's weight." My mother refused to go out with me. Even my father said, "Because Mary and Rolla don't look alike, the neighbors are gossiping that I had an affair. Let's stop going out as a family." So, I was the only one left out. Their behavior of doting solely on Rolla while treating me as an unwanted object escalated daily. "You're not going out anyway, so it's fine." They stopped giving me an allowance and rarely bought me clothes. Even on my birthday. "We don't think it's something to celebrate that Mary was born, so no party." Leave it alone. Rolla would be taken to a restaurant or get new shoes just for scoring well on a test. But despite all that, Rolla grew up to be a kind and humble person. She would subtly find out what I wanted, tell our parents she wanted it for herself, and then give it to me as a present. Whenever she went out with our parents, "I want Mary to come along too," she always said. Our parents would. "It's because she's weak and might get sick if we take her out." Convince her. Rolla would. "Why are Mom and Dad so cold to Mary? We're both their children," often complained to me. She couldn't understand why I wasn't loved the same way. Everyone around us praised Rolla for her beauty, but she didn't seem to realize it herself. She didn't think it was a reason to compare herself to me. "It's not looks that matter. What's important is a person's heart." Rolla would say things like that, wise beyond her years. Even though I'm her sister, I have to say she didn't seem like our parents' child at all. When I entered middle school, my condition worsened due to hormonal changes, and I gained more weight during puberty. Even though I tried to control my diet, I kept gaining weight. Looking back, it was probably swelling from the medication. My parents, being adults, should have noticed that, but they didn't. Instead, they would berate me. "Don't walk next to us." Or, "It's embarrassing just having you come in and out of the house. Why can't you manage yourself better?" Saying. They never showed any concern or support. Rolla used to go to school with me, worried about my illness, but even that was forbidden by our parents. "Having you walk next to you lowers Rolla's reputation," they said. Rolla protested vehemently, saying it was absurd, but at that time, our household was a bit dysfunctional, and our parents' words were absolute. No matter how old we were or how reasonable our arguments, we had no choice but to comply with their harsh commands. At that time, it wasn't just that they favored Rolla, but they were simply annoyed by my presence. They wanted to stop any interaction between me and Rolla. It's almost laughable how little they treated me as part of the family. Eventually, they even scolded Rolla for talking to me, making me feel guilty for talking to her, so I started to avoid conversations with her. Rolla would tell me not to worry, but back then, "Okay, I won't worry." I didn't have the strength to just say. Gradually, a rift grew between us. Exactly as our parents wanted. We barely spoke, even though we lived in the same house, like strangers. Our parents spoke to me only when necessary and even ordered me to eat my meals alone in my room. They seemed determined to exclude me from the family. One day, I came home from school to find the house empty. There was a note on the table saying they had gone on a family trip. I knew it, but it still hurt. I wasn't considered part of the family. They had left me behind in the freezer, as if saying, "Eat this." There was a lot of frozen pizza inside. After being treated so poorly for so long, I felt pathetic for being grateful they at least left food for me, even if it was just pizza. They didn't come back for about a week, and of course, the pizza ran out. Without any allowance, I survived the last few days on school lunches alone. It became normal to be treated so poorly, and years passed. One day when I was 15, I was suddenly woken up in the middle of the night by my parents, who yelled at me to get in the car. Confused and still in my pajamas, I got in the car, and they drove to my maternal uncle's house. "Why are we going to Uncle's house at this hour?" I tried to make sense of it with my groggy mind, but couldn't find an answer. My parents rang the doorbell several times until my uncle and aunt, looking very displeased, appeared at the door. "What's going on, sis?" At this hour, my uncle rubbed his temples, clearly irritated from being woken up. My aunt, not wanting to be seen in her pajamas, tried to cover herself with a robe and fix her messy hair. "I have a favor to ask you too. I just had the most brilliant idea." My mother laughed loudly, finding something amusing. My uncle and aunt looked very annoyed by her behavior. "I want you to be with Mary. I mean, please take her." My mother pushed me forward in front of my uncle and aunt. My father. "From now on, uncle and aunt will be your new family, Mary," added. I didn't understand. My mother was genuinely excited to get rid of me, and my father, who only showed kindness in this moment, looked like a demon to me. Naturally, my uncle and aunt were stunned. My cousin Nancy, who seemed to have heard the commotion, came down from her room in her pajamas. "Mary sleeps all the time and looks terrible. She's become a disgrace to us. She'll be a high schooler next year. It'll cost even more money, and we don't want to invest in a child with no future." My father nodded in agreement with my mother's words. "We've done a good job raising her so far. We're tired, so think of it as doing us a favor and take her. It's okay, right?" My mother laughed. Did she not realize how terrible her words were? Or did she think it didn't matter because it was me? No longer able to feel sad about it. I was numb. But I wondered why I was born into such a family. Should I even be alive? Feeling completely rejected, I muttered, "I shouldn't have been born." At that moment, "That's not true!" my aunt shouted. She covered her mouth, surprised by her own outburst. But my uncle, "That's right. There's no such thing as not being allowed to be born," continued. Nancy came over and held my hand. "Auntie says it's okay. Mary, come to our place. Let's be a family." I didn't know how to respond. Even though I knew my parents didn't love me, they were still my only parents. Some part of me wanted to stay with them. But looking at their faces, they just smiled happily. Great. Hoping they'd ask me to come back. Not being loved by my parents, going to live with my uncle and aunt, I was sure I'd just be a burden to them. Even though their words were kind, I knew they must really find me troublesome. as the arrangements were made for me to move. I'm just changing the place where I'll suffer. I thought to myself. I don't care anymore. 10 years passed after that. Living with my uncle and aunt, I tried to be a good girl every day, always worried about when they might start hating me. Even after 10 years, I was never disliked by my uncle and his wife, nor was I treated as an outsider in the family. I remember the time during my entrance exams. I don't want to be a burden, so I'm going to work and leave this house. When I said this, my uncle, tears streaming down his face. The last thing a child should ever do is feel like they need to take care of adults. Angrily responded. From the moment I was taken in, I had always kept a wall up with my aunt and uncle. I always thought they would abandon me eventually. But it turns out that my uncle was struggling, not knowing how to get me to open up to him. My aunt was crying too, and I felt ashamed for ignoring their kindness all this time. I realized I could trust these people. Understanding each other's true feelings, I finally became their child. I called them Dad and Mom, and although Nancy was my age, she felt more like a close friend and cousin than a sister. My aunt and uncle's household wasn't as financially well off as my parents, who were bankers, but they celebrated my birthday with my aunt's homemade dishes and gave me the same allowance as Nancy. We didn't go on many family trips, but we always went grocery shopping together on weekends. Once a month, we'd have a pizza party, which was incredibly fun. The 10 years that flew by were much more brilliant than the 14 years I spent with my parents. And at the 10-year mark, I took a significant step. I reached out to Rolla, whom I had been estranged from for 10 years. It seemed that Rolla had never been told where I was. Knowing my parents wanted to keep us apart, this didn't surprise me. The reason for the sudden disappearance was also. They reported to the police that she ran away from home. Which was a lie. Originally, my parents were somewhat estranged from my uncle and his wife. This was because my uncle disliked my mother for being selfish and self-centered since childhood. My mother didn't like my uncle very much either. When I think about it, the last time my sister, Nancy, and I saw them was when we were about 5 years old. Due to such relationships among the adults, Rolla never imagined I would be at my uncle's house. When I saw Rolla after a long time, she looked completely worn out, losing the glow she had when she was called beautiful. However, the kindness in her embrace when she hugged me, saying she missed me, hadn't changed. I had always been concerned about Rolla too, so tears naturally welled up in my eyes. Rolla said that after she was separated from me, her parents' interference in her life became severe. By chance, she was scouted on the street and was reluctantly made to do some entertainment work due to her parents' wishes. But it was just a small magazine snap model job. It wasn't a long-lasting job, and no matter how cute Rolla was, there were always better ones. It wasn't a world where you could survive just by being cute, and there was no demand for Rolla in the modeling world. Even so, her parents didn't allow Rolla to go to college and insisted she devote herself to entertainment activities. Rolla, you'll definitely be fine. You can become famous, they said. Since they saw Rolla's fame as their own, they didn't want to miss the chance for her to become a celebrity. But in reality, she didn't gain any popularity, and there were times when she had no work at all for a year. In this situation, she was unemployed. She thought about saving money and going to college, but her parents strongly opposed it. There were times when they locked her up at home, saying she couldn't leave until she reflected on her actions. The escalating interference from her parents seemed to have caused Rolla to become mentally ill. She didn't seem to realize it herself, but gradually, she couldn't make the right decisions, accepting the situation as inevitable. Now, she was completely under her parents' control, taking care of her mother, who had been dragging her leg after breaking her knee a few years ago. That's not right. Why should you live your life according to Dad and Mom's wishes? I angrily spoke, and Rolla listened silently with her eyes downcast. She probably realized deep down that her life was not normal. Just a little more. Rolla, you say you can't start over in your late 20s, but it's never too late. Let's do it together. Are you going to dedicate your whole life to them? Holding Rolla's hand, I desperately pleaded. After talking for about 2 hours, Rolla finally said, "You're right, Mary. How did it end up like this?" And cried. "It's okay. You can definitely start over. I'll help you," I said, hugging Rolla. I comforted Rolla, who suddenly started to sob, and we parted ways that day. A month later, I visited our nostalgic family home. When I rang the doorbell, my mother looked at me with a face as if seeing something dirty. "What are you doing here?" she shouted. "I'm here to pick up Rolla." "What? What are you talking about? Go back. We've reported you as a runaway." "I know," Rolla told me. "What?" Not knowing about my reunion with Rolla, my mother looked at me as if I was a crazy woman. From behind her, Rolla appeared. "Sorry to keep you waiting," with a suitcase in hand. "Rolla? Where are you going with that luggage?" my mother asked in surprise. "I'm going to live with Mary." "What?" My mother looked quite surprised, and I almost laughed. "Mom, your knees aren't really that bad, are they? The other day, you walked perfectly fine to get ice cream from the fridge." Rolla's words made Mom turn pale and freeze in shock. Did she think Rolla wouldn't fight back? Or did she not realize that her knee issue wasn't as severe as she claimed? It could be both. Rolla used to argue with her parents a lot as a kid, but that had faded over the years. Dad appeared from behind. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I can't keep living under your control anymore. I want to live my own life. From today, I'm cutting ties with both of you." "What?" Dad was now the one stunned by Rolla's words. "I've always been good to you, so why?" Blustered. "You may think you've been good, but from my perspective, your actions have been overbearing." My comment clearly irritated Dad, and he glared at me. "Just because you weren't treated with love doesn't mean we were overbearing. We treated her normally as parents. Then why didn't you let her go to college? Why did you deny her opinions and twist her life? She's 27, not a child anymore. You're too controlling." Rolla, in a small but steady voice, said it had been hard for her. Dad started to argue with me, but then fell silent when he heard Rolla's words. "You can't argue, can you? You've always treated her for your own convenience. It's only natural for a child to abandon such parents." "We haven't." "Yes, Rolla accepted our wishes too. Don't act like we're the only ones at fault." Both of them claimed they weren't to blame, but they were clearly at fault. "Keep thinking you're innocent for the rest of your lives. No matter what you say, I'm taking Rolla with me." "No! Don't take our precious Rolla away. Mary, you're the worst daughter." Mom screamed, and I glared at her. "If you really cared, you should have done better. If I'm the worst daughter, you're the worst parents for not understanding your child's feelings." Mom and Dad, thinking they were innocent, didn't listen to my words. They said things like, "We've taken good care of you too, Mary." Of course, I ignored them. "Let's go, Rolla." I took Rolla's hand. Uncle, Aunt, and Nancy, who had been waiting in the car nearby, came to meet us. Mom glared at Uncle. "Why are you here?" and said, "It's not like we're taking them in since they're adults." But it's hard to watch sisters being apart. We'll consider Rolla as our child from now on. What? We'll treat Rolla and Mary as part of our family. Susan, you and your husband will have to handle things on your own from now on. Aunt's words left Mom and Dad even more speechless. You look confused. It means that all of us here are cutting ties with you. No matter what difficulties you face in old age, don't rely on us. When I explained, my parents were stunned into silence. Well, bye. Rolla got into Uncle's car without looking back. I smiled and said, "Take care." We all left, with Uncle and Aunt waving slightly, and Nancy telling them to reflect on their actions. My parents just stared in shock as we got into the car, unable to say anything, and that was the end of that day for them. A few days later, they started showing up at my uncle's house repeatedly. We'll apologize to both of you, just give us Rolla back. Pleading. But it was already too late. By then, Rolla and I had already moved out of my uncle's house and were living together on our own. Originally, I had been living with my uncle, but I rented a new place to get Rolla away from our parents. This was also my uncle's suggestion, as he believed it would be better for Rolla's mental health for the sisters to live alone. I agreed that it was for the best. At first, my uncle ignored my persistent parents when they visited, but eventually, he got angry. You say you'll apologize, but all you want is Rolla back. It's because of parents like you that you've been abandoned by your own children. If your children have abandoned you, it's your own fault. He scolded them and drove them away. My parents finally understood the gravity of what they had done and broke down in tears, but hearing about it didn't move Rolla and me at all. They cried? So what? That was how I felt. Because Rolla and I had suffered much more. I even thought they deserved to suffer more. After that, my parents started blaming each other, saying, "It's your fault the kids have drifted apart." And their relationship deteriorated, eventually leading to a divorce. After my father retired, he lived alone in that house, but he got into trouble with the neighbors over garbage disposal, and his house was vandalized. Even though he was the one at fault, he never apologized and continued to act arrogantly, making him disliked by the neighbors as a difficult old man. After the divorce, my mother, who should have been able to live a modest life with the division of property from my father, encountered a too-good-to-be-true offer through someone she met related to Rolla. She was promised a debut in the entertainment industry as an ageless beauty model and was convinced to make an investment in her beauty, including walking lessons and expensive beauty products, spending an outrageous amount of money. But as you may have guessed, it was a scam. It was impossible for my mother, who was well past 60, with a body that showed her indulgent lifestyle, to enter the entertainment industry. She probably didn't realize this because she was basking in the admiration that Rolla received, thinking it was her own. She should have faced reality much sooner. As a result, my mother ended up with a huge debt, no job due to bad knees, and a very difficult situation. She relied on a friend, who was also single and divorced, for a place to stay, but was kicked out again when that friend got remarried. Even now. If only Rolla would come back. If only she were here. She seems unable to accept reality, saying, "We don't know what her situation is now. If she's lucky, she might have a part-time job, but the standard of living she had when she was with my father, a banker, will never come back." My mother, who loved luxury, is likely living in poverty and loneliness now. As for us, Rolla has overcome her mental health issues and regained her beauty. She had always said she had no dreams of a family and remained single, but recently she got a boyfriend. We might hear some happy news soon. Nancy also got married, had children, and is now a mother of 3. And as for me, I had given up on having children or even getting married due to my condition worsening with childbirth. But I was able to marry someone. "You don't have to have children. I just want to be with you," who understood everything and said. He was a colleague from my previous job. When he first asked me out, "I might not be able to have children, so I can't think about marriage. You shouldn't be with someone like me," I repeatedly told him. But for some reason, he really liked me, even though I was not particularly beautiful. He said, "I don't know why, but I feel so at ease when I'm with you. Maybe this is what being compatible means." Laughing. He himself had suffered from mental health issues due to his parents' divorce. "Everyone gets sick at some point as they age, so having 1 or 2 illnesses doesn't change anything about you," he reassured me, saying. Even so, we were dating with the intention of getting married but couldn't take that step until, unexpectedly, I got pregnant despite being very careful. From there, the marriage plans quickly moved forward. When I think back, I wonder if it was my child who gave me the courage to finally decide to get married. I guess it was fate. Since getting married, I've been living modestly but happily, surrounded by my gentle and kind husband and our adorable daughter. My health condition worsened temporarily after giving birth, but thanks to the development of good medication, I'm now very stable and living a normal life. I even enjoy dancing with my mom friends in a dance circle. Although I get tired more easily than others, the circle is very flexible, so I can participate as I like. Whether it's because of the new medication or the reduced stress in my life, I've slimmed down from my previous weight. Though I still have a bit of cellulite that bothers me. My life is still ahead of me. "You are ugly, useless, and a waste of money. Just get married and leave this house soon." Dad spat these hurtful words at me when I was just 16 years old. I couldn't resist and ended up marrying a man I had never even seen before. I lived a life devoid of any feelings, completely dull and joyless. Despair washed over me. But life is unpredictable. I never expected a complete turnaround. My name is Grace, and I am 35 years old. I bought myself some Valentine's chocolates. "Where's mine?" And my husband Logan asked. "Sorry, I went to the store thinking I would buy something for you too, but I got so wrapped up in picking out my own chocolates that I forgot." Next time, I'll get him some nice liquor. Yes, that's what I'll do. Now, I live in a home filled with love, but when I was young, I hated being at home. That wasn't the case until my younger sister Ella became aware of her surroundings. I have a sister named Ella who is 2 years younger than me. From the time she was a baby, she had well-defined features, and everyone expected her to grow up to be a beauty. And a few years later, Ella grew up to be even more beautiful than everyone had anticipated, and Mom encouraged her to become a child model. Although being a child model meant just appearing in a few local construction ads or having her profile shown in local event ads, it was enough for our parents to feel immensely proud. They treated her like an accessory, showing her off everywhere they went, completely adoring her. Conversely, their interest in me dwindled rapidly. Perhaps it was because I resembled Dad's grandma with my broad bones, unlike Ella, who had a small face and slim limbs typical of modern kids. Not only did I draw the short straw with my bone structure, but I was also the only one in my otherwise slim family who wasn't thin. We all ate the same food, and even though I refrained from snacking to avoid being different, I was the only one who wasn't slim. Why just me? I often wondered. I can't count the times I wished I had a figure like hers. However, even as a child, I understood that comparing myself to others was futile. I am me. I should focus on my strengths. Though I thought that way as a child, my parents completely denied my existence. Well, she's the first child, so she's like a prototype. She turned out terribly. Once, when my parents were drunk in the living room, I overheard them talking bad about me. Those words, which I happened to overhear, cast a long shadow over my heart for years, making me think, am I a failed prototype? Mom was a beautiful woman who was confident in her appearance and always cared about how she looked, no matter her age. It would have been fine if she had only been particular about herself, but she was also strict with others. She would disdainfully talk about a neighbor who went out to take out the trash early in the morning in pajamas with no makeup, looking down on her. Incidentally, that neighbor was a mother of 5 children, and her husband seemed elite but was rarely home. Instead, an elderly man who seemed to be her father-in-law frequently visited their home, and sometimes we could hear him shouting. In hindsight, she was probably being harassed. Even from a child's perspective, she always seemed to be struggling. What's wrong with being makeup-free and in pajamas while dealing with parenting and countless hardships alone? In fact, it's impressive that she managed to do the housework so well under those circumstances and should be praised for it. I thought Mom was the one who was insensitive and cold-hearted, unable to understand people's situations. It was sad but natural that such a mom didn't find me, with my unattractive looks, cute. When I became old enough to receive an allowance, Ella got $10, and I got nothing. The visible differences became more apparent. For example, Ella got a meal full of meat, while my plate was piled high with the vegetables she hated. By the way, I hated those vegetables too. Dad never said anything about Mom's behavior, and Ella, sensing something was wrong with this household, seemed to enjoy my precarious position. There wasn't a single ally for me in the house. Ella wouldn't get scolded even if she broke something, but I would get harshly reprimanded and often hear, "You're the older sister, aren't you?" This phrase was used as a kind of excuse to make me the bad one. It's common for younger siblings to get hand-me-downs from their older siblings, but in our house, it was only when Ella declared she didn't want them or outgrew them that the clothes would come to me. As a result, I always wore clothes that were too small, with sleeves and hems that didn't reach properly. Having a big-boned frame and not being skinny, wearing clothes that were too small was the worst. It made me look even fatter, and of course, my classmates found it hilarious. Even though it was Mom who dressed me in ill-fitting clothes, she would also laugh at me with disdain. At home and outside, I kept hearing that Ella was the cute one, and my originally bright personality gradually darkened. Even when interacting with friends, thoughts like maybe this person thinks I'm ugly too, or maybe they secretly want to be friends with Ella, would cross my mind. Now I know how irrational those thoughts were, but at the time, I kept having such paranoid delusions. With such a negative mindset, it's no wonder I couldn't maintain relationships, and my friends gradually decreased. However, rather than feeling depressed about it, I preferred isolating myself. I was tired of doubting people's feelings while interacting with them. It was more comfortable being alone. During this gloomy school life, just before entering high school, an incident occurred. It turned out my parents hadn't paid my high school enrollment fee. My parents never intended to send me to high school. They wanted to spend money on Ella's dance and acting lessons instead. After some persuasion, I finally got my parents to agree that, "If you pass the cheap public high school entrance exam, we'll let you go," he asked. At the time, Ella's entertainment activities were increasing, and I, burdened with household chores by my parents, studied desperately amidst the chaos and passed the public high school entrance exam as instructed. Thinking everything would be okay now, I naively trusted my parents. Those people were not my parents, but monsters who just gave birth to me. Mom said, "Enrollment fee?" I forgot. "But it's fine, you don't need to go to high school." Even if you study with that face, your life won't be much better. Without any apology, Dad and Ella laughed loudly while clapping at this. Realizing too late that the enrollment fee hadn't been paid, I gave up on high school. Of course, there was the option to work part-time, save money, and enroll a year later, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I felt burnt out. The path I desperately pursued by following my parents' orders was suddenly closed, and I felt like, with a standard education, I still couldn't shake the dark thoughts that no one would ever love me. But that shouldn't have mattered. Why does adolescence make us so negative? My parents said, "At least you don't have to go to school, now you can do all the housework." They said it sarcastically, but I had already resigned myself to such a life. I didn't feel like going to a part-time job, nor did I have the energy to leave home, and looking back, I was probably on the verge of depression. Every day felt like I was a robot, just doing what my parents told me to do. One day, "Hey, tomorrow is your 16th birthday, right?" Suddenly, my dad spoke to me. "What?" "Yeah." Lately, my dad had been ignoring me, so I couldn't help but smile when he mentioned my birthday. My birthday was usually ignored every year, but maybe this year they would celebrate it? Maybe it was because I had been working so hard on the housework? I had a faint hope. Then, "Get married and leave the house soon. An ugly, useless daughter who costs too much money is a burden." What? Dad forced the idea of marriage on me as casually as telling me to go to the supermarket. I was so stunned I couldn't say a word. Without even looking at me. "Get married and leave the house tomorrow." He said something outrageous. "Wait, what do you mean, Dad?" "There's someone we need to get close to for Ella's work. He's the son of someone in the entertainment industry." "But why marriage?" At a dinner, Grace saw his picture and liked him, so the conversation led to marriage. Seeing Dad so pleased made me feel an unfamiliar sense of disgust. I had never seen a picture of this man, and Dad's smiling talk felt like he was selling his daughter. Anyway, a man who would marry a girl he'd never seen in this day and age, it's impossible. Everything seemed unreal. "The guy saw your picture and liked you. It's a miracle that someone likes you, be grateful." Dad finally looked at me with a big smile, leaving me speechless. Liked me? That was impossible. I had always been told I was unattractive. For someone to like that, it must be a very strange person. Maybe he's desperate, or just doesn't care, or maybe he's trying to make me do something terrible. I could only think there was some hidden agenda. When I tried to say I didn't want to, "If you complain, I'll throw you out," Dad yelled, and I had no choice but to stay silent. And so, I was forced into marriage. Ella watched and laughed, clapping her hands, enjoying my misery. It was a moment when I cursed my weakness and being born into this family. So, I got married to a man I had never seen before. I was forcibly taken to a new house prepared by his parents, where I met him for the first time. My husband Logan, 10 years older than me, was a very plain man. He wasn't particularly gloomy, but he lacked energy. I'm not beautiful either, so I can't be picky, but he wasn't someone I could ever fall in love with. He also seemed to have a bad relationship with his parents, and his father-in-law Elijah said, "We were glad to get rid of him too." He seemed happy that Logan was leaving home because of this marriage. Ah, so we're both the same. Thinking that made me feel empty and sad, like we were both being discarded in this marriage. Thus began my life with Logan, a marriage I never wanted. For the first month, we only exchanged greetings in the morning and before bed. We ate separately, and I avoided seeing him as much as possible. But one day, Logan said something unexpected. "I know you don't like me. I'm sure our parents tricked you into this marriage, right?" What? It was true, but I was unsure how to respond honestly. Seeing my reaction, Logan understood everything. You don't have to answer. And smiled. But I really did like your picture. That's a lie. There's no way you could like me. Ella is much prettier. No matter what you say, I felt something when I saw you. Marrying you only confirmed it. Maybe it's because we have similar backgrounds. I was drawn to your inner self. Logan's sincere words left me speechless. I couldn't believe it, yet his eyes seemed truthful. Having never experienced love, I was confused by this kind of affection. If you're unhappy, you can file for divorce. I have the papers ready. But if you'd like, why not start as friends? His shy smile made my heart flutter just a bit, a secret I still keep. His suggestion to start as friends rather than as a married couple, showing kindness and understanding, moved me. We began eating meals together. We didn't have any formal agreement, and even after seeing Logan's kindness, it took time to become comfortable with him. Slowly, we started having conversations about the weather and our preferences, breaking down the invisible wall between us. We found that we both loved books and had many common interests. As he had mentioned, we were both treated as outcasts by our parents, sharing similar values and thoughts, making our time together more comfortable than with anyone else. As we lived together for a year, then too, Logan proposed to me, and we truly became a married couple in our hearts. Does it sound strange to get proposed to when you're already married? Well, we were always an odd pair. We skipped dating and the initial proposal, but we took our time to rebuild those steps together. Even after 10 years, our parents never visited us, but we lived a peaceful life and had a child. Just when I thought my life wasn't so bad, the news reported that a famous celebrity was arrested. Apparently, another celebrity involved in the crime could also be implicated, causing a media frenzy. It seemed like a world apart from ours until I heard Ella's name among the suspects. Though she held the title of actress, she had no significant work, barely participating in showbiz, but she was still affiliated with an agency and occasionally worked as an extra. Despite her lack of fame as an actress, she gained notoriety as a criminal. Photos showed her entering a club with a famous actress and a group of men. While she managed to avoid charges, it was clear to everyone that she was involved. The person who leaked the photos was a classmate who worked at the club and disliked Ella. This classmate took photos secretly when Ella visited the club. She's up to something shady. And shared them. Someone sold it to a magazine, and that's how this whole mess started. Well, I thought it had nothing to do with me anymore, but suddenly my parents showed up at my house. As soon as I opened the door, "Help me, Grace!" She clung to me with tears in her eyes. Dad was desperately supporting her. Mom, who used to be so beautiful, looked sickly thin, her hair dirty and thinning with gray strands. "What are you doing here?" "I don't remember being asked for help." "You're the only one we can rely on now." "Huh?" Seeing my confused expression. "Let me explain," Dad said. Apparently, Ella had been arrested recently. Since she was a no-name actress, it hadn't made the news, so I didn't know. Ella's classmates had somehow gotten the information, even though I, her sister, hadn't. Rumors had spread, and now everyone in the neighborhood knew about Ella's crimes. As a result, my parents' home had been subjected to graffiti, stones being thrown, and silent phone calls. "We can't live in that place anymore. Why did Ella do such a thing? I should never have had her. You're my only daughter." She broke down in tears, hugging me tightly. "Please, we can't live in that house anymore. Let's live together here and have a happy life together." What are they even talking about? I quietly grabbed Mom's shoulders and pushed her away. Grace, I don't remember ever having a happy life with you two. What are you saying? We were a close family. That's right, Grace. Their confused expressions showed. They didn't want to upset me. If we were a close family, I wouldn't have ended up in this marriage. You sold me out for Ella. But you're still married, aren't you? It turned out fine. Dad's smirk made me snap, and I shoved him. Don't joke around. What was fine about it? It just so happened that Logan is a good person, but if he were a bad person, my life would have been hell. What do you think people's lives are? A family built on someone else's sacrifice is bound to fall apart. I shouted, my voice trembling with anger. Tears welled up unexpectedly. Logan, who had been standing next to me, gently took my hand. Forgiving people is important, Grace. Dad said this with a sleazy smile, and I, irritated, finally said what I'd been holding back. Then why don't you both live with your respective lovers? Forgiving is important, right? Just forgive each other's mistakes. The two of them froze. Their faces pale as they looked at each other. What? Did you think I didn't know? Both of you were cheating, right? You didn't realize you were betraying each other? Yes, my parents had both had affairs. They thought no one knew, but Ella and I were aware. Not only the parent-child relationship, but also their marriage was broken. Where is this happy family they talk about? You betrayed me? Mom screamed. And you did too. Dad shouted back. I watched this scene with a cold gaze. Forgiving is important, right? Stop fighting and forgive each other. I sneered, and they fell silent. I don't want to be involved with you anymore. Don't contact me again. I don't care about the harassment or whatever. Fall into hell for all I care. I'm not going to be tied down by you anymore. I hurled the years of pent-up anger at them, using harsh words. The two of them, realizing they couldn't trust each other, desperately begged me to forgive them. How pathetic. Of course, I refused their plea. If you continue to involve yourself with me, I will take appropriate action, I declared. I said it in the heat of the moment, but I didn't really think about what action to take. I couldn't rely on the police, but being tough is key in these situations. Whether my words had any effect, I don't know, but they seemed to understand and sank to their knees on the sidewalk. Let's go, Logan said, urging me to go back inside the house. I obediently took Logan's hand and went back inside. After a while, I heard them crying outside, calling my name, but I never opened the door. After that, about a month later, I got a call saying my parents' home had burned down under suspicious circumstances. I don't know if it was related to the Ella incident or not, and the culprit hasn't been caught, but it was a house that had been vandalized a lot, so it was definitely targeted. My parents, despite the affair being revealed, did not choose to divorce, but my mom suffered burns on her proud face. It wasn't severe, but the scars were somewhat keloid-like. And whether it was because of that or for some other reason, my dad left the house one day without saying anything. He abandoned her. Mom seemed to think it was because she wasn't beautiful anymore, and the once outgoing woman barely left the house anymore. Originally, they were both cheating on each other, so it wasn't just about appearances. They were probably just tired of being together. Only God knows the truth. But I bet I know more about my dad than my mom, who didn't notice his infidelity. Dad, too, had been borrowing money from financiers to promote Ella and had been flattering important people, losing his job and accumulating a lot of debt because of Ella. Ella, after serving about 1.5 years in prison, started appearing in shady videos, likely because she had no money. I've heard rumors that she's mentally unstable, but that's no longer my concern. Karma really does come around, I thought, as I watched their downfall from afar. Meanwhile, I am currently blessed with 4 children and leading a hectic life. When my youngest was born, they were twins, which was really tough. Since both Logan and I have low education, we were worried about whether we could afford to raise 4 children. But we worked hard to get qualifications, and now I'm a medical clerk, and Logan is a manager at a merit-based call center that doesn't care about education or nationality. It was tough studying while raising kids and being pregnant. Logan was busy with job hunting but supported me a lot, and I'm really grateful for that. He's cooperative with both childcare and housework. Even though our marriage started off strange, I'm proud to be married to him. In that sense, maybe I should be grateful to those two. He is not only a devoted father but also still treats me like a lover. It's a bit embarrassing, but even at our age, we still go on dates sometimes. To the movies or a cafe, it's like a student date, but it's important time for us who got married without dating much. I hope we can continue to cherish each other and our family. I hope tomorrow will be another happy day. Thinking this way, I cherish each day.